I wouldn't be so quick to assume that we are going to see an invasion of Ukraine, right? What we can say is all the preparations are in place for a regional war in Ukraine. That's not the same thing as saying it's inevitable.
Tina Fordham of Avonhurst, and just like that, the tone in this market shifts and shifts markedly. Look at this, futures turn positive, up 0.2% on the S&P. On the Nasdaq, up a tenth. Yields turn higher, up 2 basis points on 10s, much more so on 2s, up 6, back to 156. Crude down 1 full percentage point now to 92.20. And here's the headline, Tom, from the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. I would propose to continue diplomatic measures, continues his contacts with the West, says there's always a chance to agree. Yields turn higher, Tom. Equities turn higher too.
Follow-on headline then, and these are just headlines coming out in rapid speed, folks. Putin said, quote, all right, unquote, in response to Lavrov's proposal. That's when the markets really moved here. As John mentioned, the elasticity in the short-term bond yield is really something. Oil, yes, oil doing better from a 96 to 94. Brent crude now 93.73. And John, the backdrop here, John, I want you to bring in Maria, but the backdrop here, folks, not only are the headlines from the Russian leaders, but, John, at the same time, the press waiting in Ukraine for the leaders of Germany and Ukraine. And I think it's the imagery here right now. For those on radio, it's really quite something with the German and Ukrainian flags in Kiev, John, as the story moves minute by minute.
The Chancellor Scholz meeting with the Ukrainian leader today. He'll meet with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, tomorrow. Joining us now, Maria Tadeo, Bloomberg Europe correspondent out of Brussels. Maria, your read on the headlines so far in the last 10 minutes?
Well, it is very significant. Going into Monday, Vladimir Putin said that he wanted to speak to two people, his foreign minister and his defense minister, and then he would make up his mind. He's had a meeting so far with Sergei Lavrov, who's a very, very experienced diplomat, as you know, and Sergei Lavrov is saying we should still talk with the West. There may be a way forward. For Vladimir Putin, he's made it clear it's not that, it's a yes, we can go for it. So there's another meeting that is still pending with his foreign minister, but this one so far does show that Vladimir Putin does want to continue with dialogue. And it's also interesting because on Saturday, when he spoke with Emmanuel Macron, the French president told him we can continue to talk, but there can be no escalation. They're not compatible. So far, you could argue this is a clear signal that Vladimir Putin is still at the table.
Well, let's talk about how the diplomacy is set up today and into tomorrow. Today, the German Chancellor with the Ukrainian leader. Maria, tomorrow, the German Chancellor with the Russian president. How important is that going to be?
Well, this is incredibly important. It's the first time that we see Olaf Scholz and Vladimir Putin meet together. These are the two countries that are the most intertwined. When you look at the European Union and Russia, it's also important because the timing, if you remember on Friday, there was a report suggesting that Russia can invade on Tuesday. On Tuesday is the day where Olaf Scholz will be physically present in Russia. So that moment in time, this date was particularly important. But it will also be important because it will really test the limits of Olaf Scholz. And Olaf Scholz will have to make a very clear signal tomorrow as to whether or not he wants to go ahead with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, but also tell Putin we're willing to take a lot of economic pain for you to back off from Ukraine.
Maria, if we go to Diplomacy 101, which is the grace of saving face, what are the items or mechanisms for any set of world leaders to allow Mr. Putin to, quote unquote, save face?
Well, I think there's two areas in which they believe they can both save face. Both will say we want to be much more transparent in the way that we deal with our military. Perhaps there's areas in which we both could pull back, particularly in Eastern Europe, if you pull back your troops from Russia. And also if they are much more clear in terms of the weapons and the military exercises that they're conducting. So that's an area where the two of them could, to some extent, save face. The problem, of course, is Ukraine. When it comes to NATO, this is something that Ukraine is simply not willing to give up. So either Russia changes tone on that, or it's very difficult to see what a compromise looks like, because the Russians are clear, they believe this is a threat for them, but the Ukrainians have also made it very clear they are not going to ditch that NATO promise. This means everything for them. It's almost very connected with the identity of the country. It goes way beyond the politics.
If we reaffirm 2014 in the freshwater, or I should say warm water presence that Putin needs on the Black Sea, is that enough to save face so that Ukraine can consider joining NATO?
I would say Crimea for many, and they won't say this, but Crimea is long gone, and it's very much accepted, although it's politically perhaps not correct to say that it won't ever go back to Ukraine. I think it's more in the eastern territories where there could be some middle ground. For the Ukrainians, that is also problematic because they feel like even if through the Minsk agreement you give way to diplomacy, the Russians could really take a full thing and only use it to move further into Ukraine.
So one thing that Sergei Lavrov said was that part of the U.S. response to Russia was more constructive. Do we have a sense of what that part was, what the context and what the substance was?
Look, it's not, because, and this is what really catches my eye, the United States and NATO both sent letters to Russia. Remember that. And Vladimir Putin said, I will study them and look at them very carefully. The NATO letters leaked, and we know the content of that. The United States were not. They were not leaked, and we don't know what the United States promised to Russia in those letters. So it's very interesting that Russia says, we like better what we see from the U.S. When it comes to NATO, nothing has changed. But it's also very tricky for America and the United States because they've always said nothing will get decided on Ukraine without the Ukrainians. We don't want to repeat a Yalta moment. This is not what it is about.
Maria, thank you. Over in Brussels, Maria, today on the latest headlines out of Russia as we await a meeting with Chancellor Scholz of Germany alongside his Ukrainian counterpart. Tomorrow, Chancellor Scholz goes to Russia to meet with Vladimir Putin. And Tom, just to set the scene here, on Russian state TV, an incredibly long table, looks like something 20 feet long, with the Russian president at the one end and his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov at the other to the side, having this conversation. And the foreign minister Sergei Lavrov proposing, Tom, further diplomatic efforts and just a simple response from the Russian president. All right.
Yeah, it's, you got to believe it's stage managed to some great extent. I mean, that's what the diplomatic cynic would say. But nevertheless, it's a move forward. And John, I would go back to what markets are responding, and we have our usual indicators. And I would say, John, that you can look at not a gloom board, but a board tightly correlated into the emotions going on in Europe, and that would be centered on Euro, Swissy, Brent crude, centered on gold, which was having a buoyant day. Gold, my eyes are failing me, 1857. It's a little bit weaker in the last number of minutes. And of course, you've got to go back to 210's U.S. spread, which is, again, a little bit better than it was an hour ago.
It's still flatter, but it's the why. Why is it flatter? It's because the front end is so much higher right now as we have a lift on the Treasury curve at 5 basis points, Lisa, to 155. Whether it sticks, I don't know, but certainly a move off the back of these headlines out of Russia.
It highlights the uncertainty, the lack of ability to price in the risks, the lack of understanding, frankly, of what Vladimir Putin's motivation is. I was looking at the implied volatility in Treasury yields. It's the highest level going back to the start of the pandemic. You take a look at some of the implied volatility. People don't know where to look next.
We'll bring you the headlines. You get to decide how to read them. The Russian President Vladimir Putin saying all right to his foreign minister's proposal to continue diplomatic efforts. This equity market turns positive on the S&P by a single point. The Nasdaq now essentially unchanged. Yields higher on the front end by 5 basis points to 155 on US 2s. From New York, heard on radio, seen on TV for our audience worldwide. This is Bloomberg.
America's greatest minds.
There's a lot of dynamics under the hood. It makes sense to start repositioning portfolios.
We're not getting as much bang per buck, real earnings, if you will.
I think the equity market is obviously got a little bit of a reprieve in here.
Stocks will be still your best inflation hedge.
Our call for this year has always been more subdued market returns and more differentiation within them.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene on radio and television. We welcome all of you to Bloomberg Surveillance. Maria Tadeo in Brussels, Anne-Marie Horton in Washington. We're going to talk on Ukraine and Russia with these breaking headlines in a moment. John, I really think we got to rip things up here at the top of the show this morning, and everybody dive in here. John, I'm seeing huge moves. The two-year yield in the last 3 days, 27 basis points. The markets are the litmus paper of this political debate.
That was a monster move, Tom, on Thursday off the back of CPI in America through 160. Then we backed away from it late on Friday as the geopolitical risk started to bubble away. Now we start to build that yield back up by 5 basis points, getting back up, Tom, to 155 on my screen right now.
Lisa, off the gloom that we saw earlier this morning, green on the screen, S&P futures up 5, Dow -2, 300, whatever. Happy Valentine's Day, John. The Dow now up 31 points. That's the equity vol of the moment.
Honestly, to me, this all highlights how much lack of conviction there is. If you look at, for example, implied volatility, I keep coming back to this in the bond market. It's risen to the highest level since April 2020. People don't know what the bigger risk is. Is it a geopolitical potential for the downside, or is it inflationary impulse that could lead the Fed to tighten too quickly?
The best news, John, is we're not strategists. Can you imagine being a strategist right now?
It's so difficult. I mean, never mind a fixed income strategist in America, Tom. Imagine being one in Europe right now. You've just started to build in the idea the ECB makes a move. You're starting to look at energy prices with a threat they go even higher from here. How on earth does a central banker respond to that?
Right.
And how do you bake in any forecast for a 10-year yield and say, Germany off the back of it?
John, let's review the last 30 minutes just for those joining in across this nation. It's simple. The Bloomberg lit up like a candle. And, John, it was simple. The foreign minister of Russia made some statements, and the guy sitting to his right or left said, I agree.
He just said, all right. What a staged moment, Tom. What a staged moment to have this very, very long table with the Russian president at the one end, the foreign minister to the side at the other end, proposing to continue the diplomatic effort, and the Russian president just saying, all right, on Russian state TV. And on that moment, Tom, things flipped. That's why we've got a positive equity market, at the moment at least, on the S&P.
Let's do the data right now, John, because we got to get to Matt Brill. We can talk here of Ukraine and Russia here in about 12 minutes. Futures up 6. John, in the bond market, what's the most entrenching item right now?
I think we've got a flatter curve, sure, but what's driving it? It's the front end again. We recover at the 2-year. Yields heading back towards where they were maybe at some point last week. 160, 160-ish through last week, Thursday, Friday. Then we backed away. Now we back up again. Yields up by 4 basis points to about 154. That gets my attention. In the FX market, euro dollar recovers a bit, still negative 0.2% at 113.27. But there's your move lower on crude, Tom. 92.23. Had a little look at 95 at one point. Now it's down by more than 1%.
Right now, we've got more headlines from Russia, John. I don't know how to translate these. First, very seriously, the defense minister telling Mr. Putin of a submarine incident. We've got to get up to speed on that. But very important here, the drills are ending. And again, this goes to the Navy, John, in the Black Sea, which, as I said to Maria Tadeo, I really wonder if that will be one of the focuses.
I've got very little to go on here, Tom. The president asking his defense minister to report on the Navy and Army drills. The defense minister saying some drills were about to end soon. You read into that however which way you like. That's the headline.
Let's do this now. We're going to stay in script here. Matt Brill to join us now, head of U.S. Investment Grade at Senior Portfolio Management in Invesco. We'll go to Eurasia Group here in a minute. Matt, how does all of this diplomacy and this geopolitics fold into what Invesco's doing to manage given instabilities?
Hey, good morning, Tom. First, I just want to wish my wife a happy Valentine's Day since prices
Matt
are
Brill,
so
that
high
was
these
smart.
days. I got to take the.
That was smart.
It's Valentine's Day. Oh,
did you get her anything?
I didn't know.
Carry on, Matt. Carry on. The state. If you want some extra time here, you take it, buddy. Especially if you stayed up all night watching